السلام علیکم ناظرین، ویلکم، خیر مقدم ہے آپ سب کا ہمارے قرآن کے تفسیر کے سیشن میں۔ انشاءاللہ ہمارا جو سلسلہ چل رہا ہے قرآن مجید کی 50ویں سورت سورہ قاف، اس کا پہلا رکوع ہم نے شروع کیا تھا۔ انشاءاللہ آج اس کی آخری آیتیں، آیت نمبر 23 سے 29 تک انشاءاللہ اس کی تلاوت کر لیتے ہیں۔ سب سے پہلے اس کی تلاوت کر لیں گے۔ اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔ وقال قرینہ هذا ما لدی عتید القیا فی جہنم کل کفار عنید مناع للخیر معتد مریب الذي جعل مع الله إلها آخر فألقياه في العذاب الشديد قال ربنا ما أطغيته ولكن كان في ضلال بعيد قال لا تختصموا لدي وقد قدمت إليكم بالوعيد ما يبدل القول لدي وما أنا بظلام للعبيد صدق اللہ العظیم۔ یہ تھی آیت نمبر 23 سے 29۔ انشاءاللہ اس کا ٹرانسلیشن پڑھ لیتے ہیں۔ اس کے ساتھی نے عرض کیا، یہ جو میری سپردگی میں تھا حاضر ہے۔ حکم دیا گیا، پھینک دو جہنم میں ہر کٹے کافر کو جو حق سے عناد رکھتا تھا، خیر کو روکنے والا اور حد سے تجاوز کرنے والا تھا، شک میں پڑا ہوا تھا اور اللہ کے ساتھ کسی دوسرے کو خدا بنائے بیٹھا تھا، ڈال دو اسے سخت عذاب میں۔ اس کے ساتھی نے عرض کیا، خداوندہ میں نے اس کو سرکش نہیں بنایا بلکہ یہ خود ہی پرلے درجے کی گمراہی میں پڑا ہوا تھا۔ جواب میں ارشاد ہوا، میرے حضور جھگڑا نہ کرو، میں تم کو پہلے ہی انجام بد سے خبردار کر چکا تھا۔ میرے ہاں بات پلٹی نہیں جاتی اور میں اپنے بندوں پر ظلم توڑنے والا نہیں ہوں۔ یہ تھا ٹرانسلیشن ان آیتوں کا۔ تو انشاءاللہ اس کی تفسیر میں جانے سے قبل ہم تھوڑا سا ریکیپ کرتے ہیں کہ اللہ رب العزت نے اس پہلے رکوع میں، یعنی اس دوسرے رکوع میں کیا بات کہی تھی۔ ہم نے دیکھا کہ پہلے رکوع میں اللہ نے قسم کھاتے ہوئے کہا تھا کہ نبی اکرم صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم اللہ کے نبی ہیں اور آخر ظاہر خونی ہیں۔ اور دوسرے رکوع میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے، یعنی کہ پہلے رکوع میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے آخرت کی نشاندہی یعنی ایویڈنسز بھی دیے تھے کہ لوگوں کو کہ غور کرو، یہ جو زمین ہے، آسمان ہے اور تمام انسان خود اپنی تخلیق پر ابھی اگر غور کریں گے تو انہیں یہ بالکل آسانی سے معلوم ہو جائے گا کہ جو چیز اللہ نے پہلی بار پیدا کی ہے اس کو دوسری بار پیدا کرنے میں اسے کوئی تکلیف نہ ہو۔ اور دوسرے رکوع میں اللہ رب العزت نے یہاں پہ جب انسان کو کہ کس طرح سے وہ یعنی کہ اللہ نے پیدا کیا اور اس کو ہر چیز کو جانتا ہے، یہاں تک کہ اللہ تعالیٰ نے کہا کہ انسانوں کے دلوں میں جو وسوسے بھی آتے ہیں اللہ تعالیٰ ان تک کو جانتا ہے، یعنی اللہ تعالیٰ انسان کی شے رگ سے بھی بالکل قریب۔ تو انسان نہ یہ غلط فہمی رہے کہ میں جو بھی کروں گا اللہ سے وہ چھپا ہوا ہوگا یا میں اس سے بھاگ جاؤں گا۔ بھاگنا تو بہت ہی مشکل ہوگا انسان کو، کیونکہ اس کو کہیں بھی اس کا راستہ نہیں، وہ بھاگے گا تو کہاں تک بھاگے گا۔ اور اللہ تعالیٰ نے یہاں پہ کہا کہ یہ جب تک کرتے ہیں، یعنی کہ اس کے بعد اچانک ان کو جب موت آ جائے گی تب انہیں پتا چلے گا کہ انہیں کیا ہونے والا ہے، کیونکہ اللہ رب العزت نے اپنے مقرب فرشتے یعنی کہ 2 فرشتے ایڈیشنل ایویڈنس یعنی ایک ریکارڈ کیپنگ کے لیے ان کے پاس رکھے ممکن رکھے، تو وہ انہیں گھسیٹتے ہوئے لے کے جائیں گے۔ تو اللہ رب العزت ہم سب کو ان بندوں میں نہ شامل کرے بلکہ اللہ تعالیٰ ہمیں نیک بندوں میں شامل فرمائے۔ تو اسی سلسلہ کلام کا تسلسل چل رہا ہے، تو آج کی ان آیتوں کی بھی تفسیر پڑھ لیتے ہیں۔ اس کے ساتھی نے عرض کیا، یہ جو میری سپردگی میں تھا حاضر ہے۔ بعض مفسرین نے اس کا مطلب یہ بیان کیا ہے کہ ساتھی سے مراد وہ فرشتہ ہے جسے آیت نمبر 21 میں گواہی دینے والا فرمایا گیا ہے۔ وہ کہے گا کہ اس شخص کا نامہ اعمال میرے پاس تیار ہے۔ کچھ دوسرے مفسرین کہتے ہیں کہ ساتھی سے مراد وہ شیطان ہے جو دنیا میں اس شخص کے ساتھ لگا ہوا تھا۔ وہ عرض کرے گا کہ یہ شخص جس کو میں نے اپنے خوابوں میں کر کے جہنم کے لیے تیار کیا تھا اب آپ کی خدمت میں حاضر ہے۔ مگر سیاق و سباق سے زیادہ مناسبت رکھنے والی تفسیر وہ ہے جو قتادہ اور ابن زید سے منقول ہے۔ وہ کہتے ہیں کہ ساتھی سے مراد ہانک کر لانے والا فرشتہ ہے اور وہی عدالت الہی میں پہنچ کر عرض کرے گا کہ یہ شخص جو میری سپردگی میں تھا سرکار کی پیشی میں حاضر ہے۔ حکم دیا گیا پھینک دو جہنم میں۔ اصل الفاظ میں القیا فی جہنم، پھینک دو جہنم میں تم دونوں۔ سلسلہ کلام خود بتا رہا ہے کہ یہ حکم ان دونوں فرشتوں کو دے دیا جائے گا جنہوں نے مرقد سے اٹھتے ہی مجرم کو گرفتار کیا تھا اور لا کر عدالت میں حاضر کر دیا تھا۔ پھینک دو جہنم میں ہر گٹے کافر کو، اصل میں لفظ کفار استعمال ہوا جس کے دو معنی ہیں، ایک سخت ناشکرا، دوسرا سخت منکر حق۔ جو حق سے عناد رکھتا تھا، خیر کو روکنے والا، یعنی خیر کا لفظ عربی زبان میں مال کے لیے بھی استعمال ہوتا ہے اور بھلائی کے لیے بھی۔ پہلے معنی کے لحاظ سے مطلب یہ ہے کہ وہ اپنے مال میں سے کسی کا حق ادا نہ کرتا تھا، نہ خدا کا نہ بندوں کا۔ دوسرے معنی کے لحاظ سے مطلب یہ ہوگا کہ وہ بھلائی کے راستے سے خود ہی رک جانے پر اکتفا نہ کرتا تھا بلکہ دوسروں کو بھی اس سے روکتا تھا۔ دنیا میں خیر کے لیے سد راہ بنا ہوا تھا، اپنی ساری قوتیں اس کام میں صرف کر رہا تھا کہ نیکی کسی طرح پھیلنے نہ پائے، اور حد سے تجاوز کرنے والا تھا، یعنی اپنے ہر کام میں اخلاق کی حدیں توڑ دینے والا تھا، اپنے مفاد اور اپنی غراض اور خواہشات کی خاطر سب کچھ کر گزرنے کے لیے تیار تھا، حرام طریقوں سے مال سمیٹتا اور حرام راستوں میں صرف کرتا تھا، لوگوں کے حقوق پر دست درازیاں کرتا تھا، نہ اس کی زبان کسی حد کی پابند تھی، نہ اس کے ہاتھ کسی ظلم اور زیادتی سے رکتے تھے، بھلائی کے راستے میں صرف رکاوٹیں ڈالنے ہی پر بس نہ کرتا تھا بلکہ اس سے آگے بڑھ کر بھلائی اختیار کرنے والوں کو ستاتا تھا اور بھلائی کے کام کرنے والوں پر ستم ڈھاتا تھا۔ شک میں پڑا ہوا تھا، اصل میں لفظ مریب استعمال ہوا ہے جس کے دو معنی ہیں، ایک شک کرنے والا، دوسرے شک میں ڈالنے والا، اور دونوں ہی معنی یہاں مراد ہیں۔ مطلب یہ ہے کہ وہ خود شک میں پڑا ہوا تھا اور دوسروں کے دلوں میں شکوک ڈالتا تھا۔ اس کے نزدیک اللہ اور آخرت اور ملائکہ اور رسالت اور وحی، غرض دین کی سب صداقتیں مشکوک تھیں، حق کی جو بات بھی انبیاء علیہ السلام کی طرف سے پیش کی جاتی تھی اس کے خیال میں وہ قابل یقین نہ تھی، اور یہی بیماری وہ اللہ کے دوسرے بندوں کو لگاتا پھرتا تھا۔ جس شخص سے بھی اس کو سابقہ پیش آتا اس کے دل میں وہ کوئی نہ کوئی شک اور کوئی نہ کوئی وسوسہ ڈال دیتا، اور اللہ کے ساتھ کسی دوسرے کو خدا بنائے بیٹھا تھا، ڈال دو اسے سخت عذاب میں۔ ان آیات میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے وہ صفات گن کر بتا دی ہیں جو انسان کو جہنم کا مستحق بنانے والی ہیں۔ نمبر 1 انکار حق، نمبر 2 خدا کی ناشکری، نمبر 3 حق اور اہل حق سے عناد، نمبر 4 بھلائی کے راستے میں سد راہ بننا، نمبر 5 اپنے مال سے خدا اور بندوں کے حقوق ادا نہ کرنا، نمبر 6 اپنے معاملات میں حدود سے تجاوز کرنا، نمبر 7 لوگوں پر ظلم اور زیادتی کرنا، نمبر 8 دین کی صداقتوں پر شک کرنا، نمبر 9 دوسروں کے دلوں میں شکوک ڈالنا، اور نمبر 10 اللہ کے ساتھ کسی دوسرے کو خدائی میں شریک ٹھہرانا۔ اس کے ساتھی نے عرض کیا، خداوندہ میں نے اس کو سرکش نہیں بنایا بلکہ یہ خود ہی پرلے درجے کی گمراہی میں پڑا ہوا تھا۔ یہاں فہوائے کلام خود بتا رہا ہے کہ ساتھی سے مراد وہ شیطان ہے جو دنیا میں اس شخص کے ساتھ لگا ہوا تھا، اور یہ بات بھی انداز بیاں ہی سے مترشح ہوتی ہے کہ وہ شخص اور اس کا شیطان دونوں خدا کی عدالت میں ایک دوسرے سے جھگڑ رہے ہیں۔ وہ کہتا ہے کہ حضور یہ ظالم میرے پیچھے پڑا ہوا تھا اور اسی نے آخر کار مجھے گمراہ کر کے چھوڑا، اس لیے سزا اس کو ملنی چاہیے، اور شیطان جواب میں کہتا ہے کہ سرکار میرا اس پر کوئی زور تو نہیں تھا، یہ سرکش نہ بننا چاہتا ہوں اور میں نے زبردستی اس کو سرکش بنا دیا ہوں، یہ کمبخت تو خود نیکی سے نفور اور بدی پر فریختہ تھا، اس لیے انبیاء علیہ السلام کی کوئی بات اسے پسند نہ آئی اور میری ترغیبات پر پھسلتا چلا گیا۔ جواب میں ارشاد ہوا، میرے حضور جھگڑا نہ کرو، میں تم کو پہلے ہی انجام بد سے خبردار کر چکا تھا، یعنی تم دونوں ہی کو میں نے متنبع کر دیا تھا کہ تم میں سے جو بہکائے گا وہ کیا سزا پائے گا اور جو بہکے گا اسے کیا خمیازہ بھگتنا پڑے گا۔ میری اس تنبیہ کے باوجود جب تم دونوں اپنے اپنے حصے کا جرم کرنے سے باز نہ آئے تو اب جھگڑا کرنے سے حاصل کیا ہے؟ بہکنے والے کو بہکنے کی اور بہکانے والے کو بہکانے کی سزا تو اب لازماً ملنی ہی ہے۔ میرے ہاں بات پلٹی نہیں جاتی، یعنی فیصلے بدلنے کا دستور میرے ہاں نہیں ہے۔ تم کو جہنم میں پھینک دینے کا جو حکم میں دے چکا ہوں اب واپس نہیں لیا جا سکتا، اور نہ اس قانون ہی کو بدلا جا سکتا ہے جس کا اعلان میں نے دنیا میں کر دیا تھا کہ گمراہ کرنے اور گمراہ ہونے کی کیا سزا آخرت میں دی جائے گی۔ اور میں اپنے بندوں پر ظلم توڑنے والا نہیں ہوں۔ اصل میں لفظ ظلام استعمال ہوا ہے جس کے معنی بہت بڑے ظالم کے ہیں۔ اس کا یہ مطلب نہیں ہے کہ اپنے بندوں کے حق میں ظالم تو ہوں مگر بہت بڑا ظالم نہیں ہوں، بلکہ اس کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ اگر میں خالق اور رب ہو کر اپنی ہی پروردہ مخلوق پر ظلم کروں تو بہت بڑا ظالم ہوں گا۔ اس لیے میں سرے سے کوئی ظلم بھی اپنے بندوں پر نہیں کرتا۔ یہ سزا جو میں تم کو دے رہا ہوں یہ ٹھیک ٹھیک وہی سزا ہے جس کا مستحق تم نے اپنے آپ کو خود بنایا ہے۔ تمہارے استحقاق سے رتی بھر بھی زیادہ سزا تمہیں نہیں دی جا رہی ہے۔ میری عدالت بے لاگ انصاف کی عدالت ہے۔ یہاں کوئی شخص کوئی سزا نہیں پا سکتا جس کا وہ فی الحقیقت مستحق نہ ہو اور جس کے لیے اس کا استحقاق بالکل یقینی شہادتوں سے ثابت نہ کر دیا گیا ہو۔ تو یہ تھی تفسیر آج کی ان بقی آیتوں کی، رکو نمبر 2 کے۔ تو انشاءاللہ اس کے بعد آنے والے رکوع میں بھی سلسلہ کلام جاری رہے گا آخرت کے تعلق سے، تو اس کو لے کے حاضر ہوتے ہیں کل کے سیشن میں۔ جزاک اللہ خیر۔
میوٹ 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 ہر طرف میوٹ۔ کیسے ہیں؟ ٹھیک ٹھاک ہیں آپ؟
الحمدللہ، جزاک اللہ، الحمدللہ
الحمدللہ، جزاک اللہ خیر۔ انشاءاللہ دیکھیں کل پھر ملاقات ہوتی ہے آپ سے
انشاءاللہ،
ہفتے
جزاک
کے۔
اللہ، انشاءاللہ۔
جزاک اللہ۔
السلام
السلام
علیکم۔
علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ Hope everyone is doing well. I'm back here again as with a Friday roundup and just kind of a wrap up of how things are shaping up across the world. Sulaiman Kohistani Saab is saying that he is inshallah available for online Quran teaching. MashaAllah, that's good. That's good. He's put his number in there as well. If anyone is interested in online Quran teaching, you may reach out to Sulaiman Kohistani Saab, as he mentioned, and he's got his number, I think, in the comments box as well. Before that, I saw Naveed Sardar Saab is online, and he's saying Assalamu alaikum to all. Abdul Rashid Saab, I saw he's online. He said Assalamu alaikum. Muhammad Idris Saab is online, and he said salam as well. So Jazakallah khair, everyone who's online watching, sharing, or experiencing what we are experiencing, obviously all across the world. This is the time period now that we are slowly winding down for this year in 2020. Many of the firms, many of the people who work across in the Western organizations that are dotted across the world are now slowly winding down towards the end of the year holidays. Sulaiman Kohistani Saab is, if it's possible, take us also to discuss. Inshallah, I'll reach out to you, Sulaiman Kohistani Saab. What I'll do is I'll ask our team or myself to drop a message to you on Facebook, and then we'll inshallah set up a time and get you online to discuss in detail in how you are obviously inshallah able to teach people online and reach out to the wider audience as well. So inshallah I'll make note and I'll drop a note to you, and then we can organize a date and slot. MashaAllah, so you're saying you've done this in Nizami and you're studying in the International Islamic University in Islamabad. That's good. MashaAllah, that's very good. I think one of the best universities in Islamabad, obviously on a global scale. You see so many people joining in. So that's a great sign. And inshallah, I will contact you and then we can take it up. As I normally do. So what I do on a weekly basis is obviously provide a quick wrap up on what are the top things happening across the world, how are elements that are currently, from a news perspective or the wider data perspective, shaping up how and what we will see in the years to come. So at the moment, obviously, we are well aware that the biggest news item anywhere and everywhere is obviously the what they call it as the what they call this coronavirus, as the thing that's known as coronavirus. It obviously is the ultimate thing at the moment. I think anywhere you look around, anywhere you think about, anywhere you reach out at this point in time, coronavirus is the discussion point globally. And it is obviously an interesting element that the virus, when it started last year in November, it has now obviously reached out globally, anywhere and everywhere, across many countries, in many domains, sovereignties, nations. Everything is pretty much led up by coronavirus, and things have been really, in effect, impacted by one way or the other because of coronavirus in 2020. But with the vaccine now coming out, there is expectation and hope that we might see slightly different 2021 as we've seen this year. And we all are hoping and praying that things do start to improve and we see a degree of normality returning to the world as we haven't seen for a while. But again, early days, you can never say what the future might hold for coronavirus. A few of the things that are happening across the world, and I think one specific element that really is coming to light is the wider rollout of the coronavirus vaccine. So one thing that obviously we've seen this year is the vaccine is now being adopted globally. And many of the different varieties of the vaccines that have been identified, including the Pfizer, Moderna one, Pfizer BioNTech one, and Moderna ones, and the AstraZeneca Oxford University one, they have been through a number of different trials, and now they are being rolled out in different parts of the world. UK was the first major Western country that adopted the new vaccine. But now we see in US, the FDA, Federal Drug Regulatory Authority, as they have in US, have approved the use of the vaccine. And the Vice President, Mike Pence, actually went on live TV to get himself vaccinated. And it's quite interesting because in US, there's a very strong push against vaccines generally. But Vice President Mike Pence actually going in and being vaccinated himself is giving out a very clear message globally that US is quite keen for this vaccine to be rolled out and people adopting it. He did it on live TV. There were a few questions that were being asked by the media as well, but generally, in essence, the whole idea was this vaccine is administered in a safe manner to anyone and everyone. And the Vice President of United States, Mike Pence, taking on this vaccine gives a very clear signal that this is the way the whole nation needs to move into. Surgeon General, he was there, and obviously some of the other attendants and the other providers and other members of Mike Pence's team were there as well. So this is, again, one of the key points in history, I would call them, in essence, that this is seen as the way out of COVID. And many of the nations across the world are now trying to ensure that they, in some way or form, at least are able to conduct these trials in a safe manner. So let's see how things are. Mohammed Mohsin Saab, I was just speaking about Mohsin Bhai, about you yesterday, and I thought about calling you, but then as usual, I forgot about it. So I'll inshallah call you after the program and we'll have a chat and see how things are shaping up. One of the other things I think obviously happening on a global scale, and this caught my eye and attention a bit earlier, and this is quite interesting. Foreign Minister Qureshi, who's obviously the Foreign Minister of Pakistan at the moment, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, he's on a visit to multiple Arab countries across in the region in Gulf. He went to UAE, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai as a starting point. Obviously, there are some discussion points about the visa issues that many of the Arab countries have imposed on Pakistan, and they are not issuing any tourist visas even to the individuals having a Pakistani passport or having a nationality from Pakistan. But one of the things he announced in UAE was that India is actually planning a strike against Pakistan, and it is looking for soft approval for some of its partners. And that's quite a startling announcement, if you would imagine, that India, the foreign minister of Pakistan said that he has credible information that India was planning a surgical strike against Pakistan to divert attention from its internal affairs. We know in India there's a massive unrest going on about the farmer issues or the land reforms that Indian government under Modi is trying to introduce. So if I'm Qureshi, Foreign Minister Qureshi is saying that there might be a risk of a new surgical strike being conducted by India. As previously we heard back in February of 2019, we had a very famous or infamous incident of the Balakot strikes, as they were called by Indian media. And then there was a whole capture of Wing Commander Abhinandan, who was then obviously freed as a diplomatic gesture by the government of Pakistan. So this is a new announcement. This is quite incredible in its own right, that foreign minister has been going out in different Arab countries and announced that India might actually be attacking Pakistan again quite soon in a surgical strike manner, which is interesting in a way that this is not so openly discussed previously or announced as such. But if it is being shared by the foreign minister, then obviously there might be a few things happening in the back end, bubbling up to see which direction this goes into. So we hope and pray that things don't turn up as badly as they did back in February, and there is a de-escalation of any enmity or any issues that are being introduced or interjected between Pakistan and India. Moving on, I think one of the major issues, obviously, neighboring Pakistan is the Afghanistan issue. And it is moving along. And this week was very interesting that one of the top US generals, General Mike Milley, has actually been meeting negotiators from Taliban in Doha. And then he traveled to Kabul as well, quite fairly within the week on Tuesday and Wednesday. And they've been trying to bring Taliban on the talking table and trying to de-escalate any incidents that Taliban or any of the other armed forces in Afghanistan have been trying to target many of the US invading forces. So this is, again, an ongoing story, and many of us are well aware that US has been trying under Trump administration to move away from Afghanistan. There was a peace deal reached with Taliban. Mike Pompeo, who is the foreign minister or the state minister of US, he went into Secretary of State, actually, foreign minister, as they are known, went into Doha, into the peace negotiation with Taliban. And this week, the top general, Mark Milley, has actually been going out and meeting Taliban to bring them to a certain degree of peace negotiations to de-escalate the issues in Afghanistan. It's not going to be certain. It's especially during the winters. There's always increased activity of insurgency. Well, summer is more than winters, but obviously leading up to it, it's going to be interesting and how this whole area shapes up in the future. Again, one thing, interestingly enough, due to the winters, as we discussed, in Japan, for the last 2 days, there have been actually more than 1,000 people who are stuck on an expressway, on a motorway, in snow. It snowed so heavily in the last 2 days, or 3 days actually, in Japan, that this expressway between Tokyo and Niigata, as it is in one of the northern sides of Tokyo, more than 1,000 vehicles have been now stuck on this motorway for the last few days. The rescue services and the disaster management officials actually reach out to all these people with blankets, with food, with supplies. But it's such a massive roadblock, and with the kind of record snowfall that has been happening in Japan, that many people are actually still stuck in different roads across the country. Many people are blaming, again, as normally do, to the climate change and the challenges around climate change. But it is yet to be seen if it is something that is going to become a norm in Japan, or this has been a record-breaking year of snowfall, as they are looking at in Japan. So we hope and pray, and there's still more to come, as you can see, I think, on the weather maps, that there's this system of low pressure bringing in a lot of snow and sleet in the northern Japan areas, and there's expectation that there might be actually more snowfall in the coming days as well. With the hotter climes further down south from the Japanese area. So these motorists, more than 1,000 of them, have been stuck for 2 days in the traffic jam. And there are recovery elements in motion. But because of the record snowfall, this is becoming a major issue, a major area of concern for many of the authorities in the local area. Moving on from Japan, something that caught my eye again this week was the Rohingya refugees that have been suffering for quite a while, as many of you might be well aware of it. This issue has been now bubbling up for more than 5 years since it started back in Myanmar, and the Rohingya were pretty much expelled from the country. And they ended up dispersed in Bangladesh and Indonesia and Malaysia and open seas, even coming all the way down to Pakistan and some of the other countries that started to accept all the refugees from Rohingya coming in. But now some of the media organizations are also trying to highlight the issue. One of the most famous children's shows on earth, Sesame Street, has introduced 2 new Muppets that are actually designed as Rohingya refugees, known as the 6-year-old twins of Noor and Aziz. And again, the idea from the creators of Sesame Street has been that they will use the power of these Muppets and the impact this show has on a global audience across the Western, more developed countries to raise awareness of this issue of Rohingya Muslims. Of more than 700,000 people have been displaced since the last 3.5 years now. And half of them obviously are in camps, and many of them are children. So again, to highlight this challenge, these 2 Muppets with their background story of being Rohingya refugees, Noor and Aziz, have been introduced on Sesame Street. And the idea is that both they get somewhat to be, in a way, be able to raise awareness about the plight of the Rohingya refugees, but also there's obviously all this discussion of diversity and inclusion in the global media industry that has been really brought to light in this manner. So this again is quite interesting how media wields this power in terms of defining a certain degree of change across the world. And in this manner, the Sesame Street, the children's show, are trying to do something positive or different to what they are able to do so in the previous years. Remaining on the plight of some of the countries that are obviously struggling from a Muslim or Islamic world context, Palestine, obviously, as we all know, has been always one of the most badly hit from an economic and a human, in a way, disaster perspective countries on planet Earth at the moment. And with the COVID and the number of cases that were identified in Palestine doesn't have that level of economy or the strength within its economic system, in a way, to go out and order millions of doses of this new vaccine that has been introduced globally, or to start vaccinating its citizens. So Palestine has been reaching out to a number of organizations. They've been reaching out to the manufacturers, drug makers like Moderna, AstraZeneca themselves, but they've also reached out to states like Russia and China to say if somebody is able to provide them with a certain degree of support in rolling out any vaccines for the people in Palestine. In the neighboring Israel, obviously as well, we are well aware, quite a developed country. They are able to buy the vaccine from the manufacturers for their population, as well as there's a huge research about vaccination in Israel on its own going on. But this is potentially can be, in a way, a bit of a problematic issue for the global organizations on how the vaccine is going to be rolled out into poorer countries or undeveloped countries who do not either have the healthcare infrastructure or the economics or the strength within their economy to order these vaccines or roll it out or more widely across to their population. So this is again an ongoing issue. It might be something that remains limited to more developed, more economically sound, and more powerful countries. But if the virus is not eradicated across the world, then there is a risk that it will remain intact in many years to come. So it is a combined effort that many individuals, countries, nations, governments have to undertake and think about, and how this becomes a major rollout element across the world. one thing very, very interesting again is 17th of December 2010 was the date and the year when Mohammed Bouazizi, who was a local stall owner in Tunisia, burned himself. And that sparked one of the biggest changes that we've seen in Middle East for a number of years, the Arab Spring. So Arab Spring is now 10 years old, if you would believe it, that it was 17 December 2020 when the street vendor Mohammed Bouazizi burned himself and started this area of massive protests and change in Middle East that is still going on. So we know Hosni Mubarak, he had to leave Egypt after 30 years of rule. Arab Spring brought him down, basically, and it brought about a change. Gaddafi, as we know, straight away after Egypt, Libya was the second country that was badly impacted. Gaddafi had to go away, and he was ultimately, as we all know, killed after the intervention by the Western forces of bombing in different areas in Libya. We know Syria was badly impacted, and this is still the continuation of the Arab Spring that started in 2010. Bashar al-Assad was supposed to be brought down by the Arab Spring, but there were allegations of use of chemical weapons. There was action by the Western powers. There was intervention by Russia. There was the rise of so-called Islamic State, or the IS as it's known. So what started on 17th of December 2010 is actually still ongoing. 10 years on, the whole decade, the problems, the refugees, the death, the devastation is still ongoing. And it is quite a stark reminder of how a single element like Mohammed Bouazizi burning himself 10 years ago has created this ripple effect across the whole world. And we still see the massive devastation and the trouble in economies, in life, and the living of the people on the ground. And we still don't have any answers. Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Egypt, many countries suffered, and they are still continuing to suffer. So it is more than 10 years now to that Arab Spring, and there are still no more answers in a way to that problem that started 10 years ago that has identified any solutions as such, and it is still ongoing. Moving on again, something shaping up in more, let's call it the Pacific region between China and Australia. But this is quite interesting that this is a way, in essence, a test case of how the global dominance of China might be challenged by some of the more Western nations. It all started with China and Australia exchanging some fiery diplomatic tweets and some kind of mishandling across different number of elements. China was in essence quite critical of the role of Australian forces during the Afghan war. And they said that Afghan war, the Australian forces committed many war crimes during the Afghan war. Australia obviously reacted quite badly, and they went on to say that China should be investigated globally for starting the coronavirus, and things went spiraling down from there onwards, as you would imagine. And now there's a massive trade war, as you would imagine. It's going on as well. China imposed a number of tariffs and duties, things like barley, quite a heavy import from Australia coming into China. They put on additional taxes on it, and now it's kind of escalating in a full-on diplomatic war between these two countries. Australia is, in a way, very much, I won't say dependent, but a major chunk of Australian exports going to China, and hence there's an impact on the kind of economy, on the day-to-day lives. Many of the visas for Chinese students and professors in Australia was cancelled out. China kicked out many of the journalists from Australia. There's been so much acrimony between these two countries going on for the last few months that it seems like that it is the footprint of how the global, more Western countries in a way might be looking up to the dragon of China, in essence, to see how they are going to negate the importance and the impact now China has pretty much on a global economy and the might it is building up. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out, because it's going to have a direct impact on the handling of the wider elements in that regard as well. More closer to home, and just to kind of wrap it up, obviously the big talking point in UK is Brexit. So the transition period, as it was agreed between European Union and the United Kingdom, is now going to end on the 31st of December on 2020. And there is still no trade agreements or a trade deal that has been reached between the two countries. And now, obviously, both sides are pretty much, in a way, in a perilous the situation, which is quite perilous in a way, that they would have to come to some sort of an agreement within the next few hours. Otherwise, UK will be pretty much crushing out of European Union without any trade deal, without any agreement on what will happen about visas, what will happen about people traveling from one area to the other, what will happen about all the trucks that travel between UK and Europe on a daily basis, supplying these hundreds and thousands of different items. So it is an interesting debate. It is an interesting negotiation that's ongoing. And we might have to see how this actually shapes up in the next few days. Otherwise, obviously, it's pretty much going to be a crash out for UK from European Union and the biggest economic bloc on this planet at the moment. And the last bit, I think, just as a very high-level overview, I think many people have been concerned about traveling for Umrah and Hajj throughout this year. And there are signs now that Saudi Arabia and some of the other Gulf countries might be moving into some degree of normality at some stage or some point. It feels like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have already started their vaccination programs. The Minister of Health in Saudi Arabia, Tawfiq Rabia, as he's been reported, took the first vaccine in Saudi Arabia of the coronavirus vaccine that has been developed by the BioNTech and Pfizer, obviously. So there have been quite a number of cases in Saudi Arabia, as you would imagine. More than 360,000 cases were reported. But now, so that this vaccine is being rolled out, there is hope that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will start to be rolled out more aggressively across the country. And at some point, we see the travel restrictions widely being lifted, and the restrictions that have been on Umrah and Hajj throughout this year started to phase out and change in the coming days. So again, we all are hopeful, as many of us are aware of all the differences, changes, and the challenges that many countries have been facing and still continue to face. So we are hoping that things improve and we see some degree of change into the coming days. But as of yet, it is what it is, as they call it. So we are hoping that things start to improve in the coming weeks and months. So thank you very much, all who watched today. Just a quick wrap up of a few of the highlights and the top news items that have been dominating the news and discussions for the last week. And inshallah, we'll continue with this show tomorrow, 7 p.m. UK time. You will hear more about the book readings that we are doing from Mullah Maududi's book. And then obviously on Sunday, you'll have a special dedicated session about the marriages and homemaking discussions that we have. So for today, Jazakallah khair for watching, and we'll inshallah continue and meet tomorrow at 7 p.m. Jazakallah.